We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals regular meeting for May 28th, 2025. First item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum, and with all 5 members of the board present, we do have a quorum today. Next item is public comment section. Has anyone reached out to the staff to?
Chair Young, we have not had anyone reach out.
Okay. Next, we'll move to the consideration of our minutes from the regular meeting on April 23rd, 2025. Those minutes were provided to the board members. Are there any changes necessary to those?
I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve. Will you call the roll for us?
Mr. Batchelor?
Aye.
Ms. Lavender?
Aye.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. All right, so those minutes stand approved. Next, we'll move to new business. Our first item today is a variance request, application Z25009 by Joe Swanson Jr. on behalf of Swanson Irrevocable Family Trust. They're requesting a 23-foot variance from the required 42 front setback. This is for property located at 831 Park Avenue in a heavy industrial zone. The applicant is requesting a 19-foot front setback along Park Avenue in order to construct an approximately 54 square foot addition to an existing building. Ms. Lewis, if you'd review that for us.
Good afternoon. For this item, the applicant, Joe Swanson Jr., is requesting a variance from the required front setback in the heavy industrial zoning district in order to construct a 6 by 10 foot mechanical room on the west side of the existing building, which is the front of the building. The variance being requested is for a 23-foot variance from the required 42-foot front setback along Park Avenue, which would result in a 19-foot front setback. Below shows a table of the minimum lot and setback standards for industrial uses in the heavy industrial zoning district, with the variance request shown in red. As demonstrated in the table, the mechanical room would be constructed in the front setback. The property located at 831 Park Avenue is zoned heavy industrial and is located southwest of the intersection of South Church Street and Broad Street. The neighboring properties along Park Avenue are also zoned heavy industrial and are used for a variety of industrial uses. 831 Park Avenue is currently a non-conforming lot as the existing structure encroaches into the 42-foot front setback and the 10-foot side setback on the north side of the property. Additionally, a railroad runs along the north side of the property, and this lot was created before the setback requirements in Chart 2 of the zoning ordinance were adopted, and neighboring properties also do not conform to the heavy industrial setback minimum bulk requirements. The site is occupied by the Heartland Company, which operates as a fuel production facility. If approved by the BZA, the variance would allow for the construction of a mechanical room on the front of the building to house new electrical equipment installed by Middle Tennessee Electric. The upgrade is needed to support the increased power demands on site, and MTE has stated that the equipment must be enclosed in a mechanical room. MTE has also stated that the front location is the preferred location, but does not state that the proposed route and location is the only one that would meet MTE's requirements, but they did indicate that other routes may be problematic. The heavy industrial zoning district requires a 42-foot front setback, and the building on the subject property already encroaches into this setback due to the construction of the building preceding the adoption of the setback standards in the zoning ordinance. The requested additional reduction in the front setback will reduce the front setback from the standard 42 feet to 19 feet along Park Avenue. The applicant has submitted a letter and documentation requesting the variance and addressing the 5 standards needed to be met to grant a variance. Based on the application and documentation submitted, staff has concerns with 3 of the 5 standards, which we will now get into. The first standards that staff has concerns with is that the requested variance is due to specifically identified characteristics of the land, such as the narrowness, shallowness, shape, topography, or other conditions of the land are such that compliance with one or more applicable zoning regulations would be extraordinarily and peculiarly difficult or would result in an undue hardship for the applicant. Staff does not see any characteristics on this property that are extraordinarily difficult that would cause undue hardship or create restrictions for the applicant. The existing lot is approximately 340 feet wide, which exceeds the 50 feet required minimum by the zoning ordinance, and it is approximately 540 feet deep at its shallowest point. The lot does gently slope toward a ditch in the rear of the property and is generally rectangular in shape. The existing non-conforming structure is not sufficient to meet this standard. The second standard is that the requested variance is due to specifically identified characteristics that are unusual to the subject land as compared to other land in the same zoning classification and in the same area. Staff does not believe that the subject land is unusual compared to surrounding heavy industrial zoned parcels. Neighboring properties of similar size and shape as the subject property do not meet the front setback requirements in the zoning ordinance, so the subject land is not unusual compared to surrounding properties. And the third standard that staff has concerns with is that the requested variance is due to specifically identified characteristics or hardships that were not created by any action or inaction of the owner's agent. Staff believes that the need for the variance is a result of the tenant's operation. The variance appears to be self-created since the use of the tenant requires an improved power service. Those were the three standards that staff believes the applicant does not meet, and a variance must meet all 5 standards to be approved as required by the zoning ordinance. Whether the variance is approved or denied, the BZA must make specific findings of fact on each of the variance standards. Staff does not recommend the approval of the variance based on the application not meeting all 5 standards set forth by the zoning ordinance to approve a variance. If approved, staff recommends that the variance be approved with the following condition. BZA approval does not imply approval of the site plan. A site plan shall be submitted for review and approval subject to the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance and design guidelines. I'm here if you have any questions, and I believe the applicant is as well.
So this was a non-conforming lot prior to the setbacks being established. Do you have any idea, you're saying it's 19 feet, but how far is the existing structure in the setback as it sits today?
Currently, the structure is about 29 feet from the property line, so it encroaches about 13 feet into the
So
setback.
in essence, they're asking for an additional 10 feet
Yeah.
from where they are today. Do you have any idea, or can you tell us the surrounding properties, if any of those properties are encroaching in the 42-foot front setback?
Yeah, and I can also pull up our GIS to show some of those properties to the north, if they want to show my screen. Yeah, so this is the subject property right here, and then as you can see, a lot of these properties, they're in the same zoning classification, also encroach into that front setback.
In our packets, there was a shot of, along this side, that showed concrete pad and heating HVAC equipment that looked to be similar
Chillers and-
in the setback as this would be. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
In fact, it looks as if where this proposed improvement is actually less than the chillers and the HVAC pads are already there, correct? If you look at the survey,
Yeah, it does. Yeah, they do appear to be closer to the property line.
Yeah, and the difference there is this will actually be enclosed and a part of the structure. Those are mechanical units that are not enclosed and intended for human habitation. That's where the difference is. Those mechanical units as well under today's standard would not be permitted in the area they currently are, but are allowed there since it's a non-conforming structure.
yeah, but when you talk about a 54 square foot constructed there, that's not going to be habitation either.
It is going to be roofed structure, so it is a part of the building.
Yeah,
It is going to house mechanical equipment, but it will be part of the building.
yeah.
I guess I'm the same. We're trying to get in my head why this, I guess it's because it's something new that you're not allowed, that you're against it versus, like say downtown, the residential where we allow the smaller setbacks because it matches with what's there already. I guess what's the distinction of this that gave the city staff pause to allow this when there's others that are in the setback and even on the side of the building that would now not be allowed but are there already?
Yeah, and it's because it's new or a new, roofed structure that would be included, and protrude into the setback, the way nonconformities are allowed is they're allowed to exist within their current setback. Expansion can take place on site as long as they meet bulk regulations. So the fact that this is enclosed and, roofed structure elevates it to this standard of it is a portion of the building itself and it can't be in the front setback. Mechanical would technically be mostly handled through our design guidelines at this stage as well versus a zoning ordinance. So the difference there would be planning commission weighing in on that versus the structure requires it here for a variance.
So if it needs to be a roofed structure, what type of electrical equipment is it that it can't be contained within the existing building?
Yeah, and I would defer that to the applicant, and I know that Mr. Roundtree and Mr. McGuire are both here representing the applicant as well as Joe the third, who's the applicant, and they would be better suited to answer that question.
Good.
All right, any further questions for staff at this point before we let the applicant?
Just so I understand, the standards, the zoning standard setbacks of 42 feet were set well after the construction of the existing improvements.
So this building, let me pull it up on. I want to say this building was built a few years prior, but I will confirm.
Well, I mean, it'd have to, if it was already, it would have had to have if it wasn't, there would have had to have
Right.
because you've already said it's, what,
And it's a,
13 feet into this setback.
Yeah.
and it's in the tours industrial area at that.
Yeah, and so according to the tax card, it was built in 1980. Our zoning ordinance was approved in 1983. So it was built about 3 years prior.
Clyde, do you somebody want to address?
Any more questions for staff, and then we'll have the applicant come up?
BZA Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thank you for allowing us to speak on behalf of our client, Joe Swanson Jr. and Joe 3 here. As was mentioned, obviously it's not meeting today's standards. This was Joe B. Jackson. We were just talking about Joe B. Jackson with the buffers and making sure no loading docks on the front, and you got some glass. There's a lot of components now that we're getting used to in industrial areas that this would never happen. I drove over this right before the meeting just to kind of check out, looking at all the circumstances in adjacent properties. And really, as you're driving up to our property, there's loading docks facing right onto the road, right off of Park Avenue. There's all kinds of standards in that area that are not current. So with that in mind, this is actually a positive thing from an ownership standpoint. This is a client that is a corporate headquarters for client. They employ 67 people. They want to build their business up to about 90 people at this location. They're experiencing growth, and they called Middle Tennessee their home, Murfreesboro their home. This has come, they said it's not self-created, but it's basically the benefit of a business that's booming. This power requirement is part of their process. They incinerate waste from kind of siltation from a product of sewage treatment, and they turn that into fuel. As a result of that process, it requires a very intense heat, and the power requirements they're having now are showing some issues. So they've met with Middle Tennessee Electric to see if they can alleviate the problem. Middle Tennessee Electric said they can, but the amount of power they're going to need at that location requires the actual, Joe says, a switching unit to actually be housed within its own contained room. It's not an occupied room. It's just a room that allows this equipment to be inside of it. It'll have a door for access just for maintenance, but it's also, they've analyzed the inside of the building for this power to come into the building. This is an optimum location because basically the side of the building is all bay doors once you get past their office space. So it really works in both directions. This is where Middle Tennessee recommended it. This is where they would like to have it based on the interior use of the building. So all that being said, we just feel like this is one of those kind of requests. Obviously, it's not today's standards, and it's not the most aesthetically pleasing component to a building. However, if you drive over there, there's massive AC units out front, power lines overhead. There's no landscaping. There's no buffer. There's no anything that we're used to seeing now. So all that being said, if you want to get into the technicalities of the business, what's really driving this situation, Joe Three's here. He can talk about that. It's pretty interesting what they do. If there's any other questions you have for me, I'd be glad to answer them. The building has two types of metal. I just told him, I said, this is not the prettiest building in the world. I hate to be critical, but that whole area is really, it was not, it's over 40 years old. It's the old design standards, and you just go, you all would know it just from driving there going, violations everywhere. But a functional, they're all functioning businesses, but they're just nowhere near what we expect from today's standards.
Joe, do you have a feel whether relocating this, since it is kind of you guys creating the desire that this is where it makes the most efficient, what sort of hardship it would put on you if it was somewhere else that wouldn't require this?
Yeah, and we talked about that as well. They anticipate as they grow, they're already in coordination with the next tenant down. This is a 4-suite building. They're occupying the first suite. Suite's probably a general term because they're really not suites. They're just spaces that have been assigned as suites. But they would like to continue to advance to this location. As I've learned more about our area, we love Murfreesboro, but Murfreesboro is popular because we're in the center of so many locations that we can reach in so many areas. So they service multiple municipalities. This process is a newer process, and they're finding other municipalities want to use their process. They actually have a little bit of a manufacturing component at this facility, a testing component. So they like this location because it's centrally located with a lot of the clients they're serving. And there is some expansion room. It's a large building. We're only occupying 1/4 of it, but their anticipation is to expand. As their business expands, they would love to stay here at this location. That's the only caveat right now that's holding back is the power requirement.
And is that equipment that could be housed inside? What type of equipment are we talking about?
That's a technical question.
Joe 3 with Swanson's. So this is the secondary power equipment. The external power equipment is a NEMA 3 rated equipment, which means it's designed to be outside, designed to be wet. This is the secondary piece to that equipment, so it has to be housed inside. It's not a NEMA 3 rated piece of equipment.
You said it needs to be housed inside?
It does, yes. If it was a NEMA 3, which I don't believe they manufactured this specific component as a NEMA 3 type, it has to be enclosed inside. It has to stay dry, which is why we're looking to put this addition.
So I guess the question is then why can't it be inside the existing building?
If we put it inside the existing building, obviously those two AC units are in the way. They're going to conflict with those. With the additional amount of heat that they would be producing, we've got to get those AC units back up and running. If I put it on the far side, the right-hand side where the existing transformers are with Middle Tennessee Electric, I've got a demo restrooms that have been there since the 80s, since the building was constructed.
But it theoretically could be inside.
It would be a very, very hard process to get that, plus all of the additional infrastructure that they've already got in there. This was designed whenever they first approached us back in 2022. There were talks that, hey, this isn't going to be enough, but it's going to be enough to get us up and going. They had to hit certain milestones and show progress that, hey, we're consuming more for Middle Tennessee Electric to approve granting them the additional power. So there were preparations made on the front end, but they're kind of landlocked with their layout on the inside.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for the applicant at this point? Anything else you'd like to add for us?
I appreciate your consideration.
Okay. Thanks. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you'd come forward, give us your name and address, and provide us any comments you may have.
My name is Jill Smythe Lumsden, and my address is 511 East Main Street in Murfreesboro. And we are the next door neighbor to that building. And we're not against that improvement. It's very small. It's not going to come out way too far. I've been by there. I've looked at it. The main concern I have is, and it could be another source of income for the city, is the speeders on Park Avenue. People going 80, 85 miles an hour in their hot rods. So we just have our tenant, which is next door, is the trucking school, and they pull out onto Park Avenue and leave that lot for their road test and other driving. And we just want to make sure that that's not a problem. I don't think it would be, because it's only going to be at most 9 more feet out from the building, or it's not going to be sticking way out where you can't see. But there is a problem with speeding right there. So we just want to make sure it's safe, and maybe there's some signage that should go up, that we could put up some signage on our property if necessary and pay for it. But we do want to make sure that it's just safe, and it sounds like a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so just wanted to say that. My dad, Jim Smythe, had a doctor's appointment in Nashville today, and if he rescheduled it, it would be 3 months. So he asked me to come. Yeah, so otherwise I think it's good, and just that's my only concern, because you do have to really pay attention pulling out sometimes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this application? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion or a motion.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the variance, just for, at least to get it out there. Probably need a second before we can discuss it further.
I'll second.
And if I may, and I may be beating Mr. Tooley to this, we will need specific findings of facts on each of the 5 items. If the body decides to approve the variance, that would also stand if something were to change and you were to deny it as well.
Thank you, and I respect that. I guess commentary first is that there are, whether they're housed, structured or not, there are other improvements to the site that go further into the setback than this 6x9 structure would do. We already have a tremendous amount of non-conforming, we would say, properties all along this mature heavy industrial area. And while it meets 2 of the 5 standards according to your evaluations, there are some things that are hardships that with the operation, not technically as the engineer identified, we may, as far as item 3, that the variance would do specifically identify characteristics or hardships not created by the owner. In a sense, one could argue that is not self-created because of the need from a third party saying that this needs to be done. And I think there's obviously a good reason for exception for the benefit of the economic development to the area and the number of employees and so on that this company will provide. And also, obviously, standard 1, it doesn't meet, I think, as you explained, in standard item 2 about the unusual. There's not unusual geographically, or topography as far as the land, but it certainly is the fact that we have already, as we go down Park Avenue, a number of buildings that are not going to be in compliance. And I think that this would make a special exception as to why we might want to approve it.
Is that satisfying the 5 standards for, make sure we cross Ts and dot Is there?
Well, I would like to just emphasize that one of the standards, the standard number 2, is that there has to be specifically identified characteristics that are unusual to this property as opposed to the properties next to it. So, or the properties in the same area. I think it would behoove the board to perhaps look at the map of the property and see if there's something unique about either the location of the building or the railway spur or something else that differentiates this building from others in the same area. Because otherwise, there would be, essentially open season for any other building in this area to do any encroachment they want into the front setback, and that's not the intention of the variance, of course.
So I guess to clarify on that point, when you say, for other buildings, it opens a door, are we creating a precedent for all buildings in the area or just for this particular site that's before us today?
I think that the board's reasoning for either granting or denying this variance, that same reasoning, other applicants would point to that in the future potentially. And so the board should be cognizant of the reasoning that's used here. Again, the purpose of the variance ordinance is only for extraordinary hardship that's caused by extraordinary features of a particular property. And that's the reason for the variance ordinance. So the goal is to make sure that the board's reasoning, that the board makes clear its reasoning as to why this particular property is different from other properties and why the hardship here is more significant than otherwise might be the case for other properties.
If we were to feel like the non-conforming or this structure is not making the situation worse than where it is today along that, granted, it's adding a new item into the setback, a new structure into the setback. Overall, we're not reducing the overall in there. Does that hold any water? Is that
it has to be tied to particular features of the property itself. That in two of the standards kind of talk about that. Standards 1 and 2 talk about the particular features of this subject property. And so, even if the board may feel that what's being sought here is a de minimis expansion into the setback, for the variance to be granted, it has to be tied to specific hardship that would be experienced by the applicant, and that the need for the variance is caused by specific features of the property.
So in staff's recommendation to not approve this site, they didn't see that the applicant's reasoning listed under number 2 was valid?
Yes, essentially staff concluded that there are other properties in the vicinity that are in the same zoning district that have the same type of encroachment in the front setback, for example. And so this property is not unique in the fact that it's non-conforming, for example. Now, there may be other features on the property. For example, the applicant in their letter to staff, which I think is attached, pointed to the location of the railway spur, which they believe is forecloses the possibility of locating this expansion on the north and east side of the property, for example. Staff did not, my understanding is staff concluded that was not accurate, that there would be that MTE identified a different location where they could locate this equipment, notwithstanding that railway spur. And so therefore the applicant's argument there staff did not agree with.
And where was the alternate proposed site?
Mr. Donovan, can you?
Yeah, so the one that, and I guess if we can share my screen, I can describe it a little bit better. So the one alternative that we've seen that came from MTE was along Sills Way and would require an easement along a property line to reach the subject property. You know, what MTE provided us in the letter, you know, that, and even the applicant mentioned this is the preferred or optimum location, not the only location. You know, those are the two options that we're aware of at this point. The potential does exist. There are others.
So, I mean, can we use that as justification to say that, you know, crossing an existing private lot, requesting an easement, and the power not being directly in front of the building as a reasonable justification?
I think this board could conclude that that the alternative, which requires an easement over a third party's property and would require the location of the equipment in an area that, at least I believe the applicant said, would require some demolition of existing facilities and moving bathrooms, things like that. This board could conclude that that is an undue hardship that would be experienced by the applicant. But the other component that the board needs to consider, of course, is it has to be due to the unusual characteristics of the property. And so not just the fact that the property is already encroaching in the setback, but the actual need for the variance. That hardship has to be caused by unusual characteristics of the property. And there certainly may be some in this instance, but the board needs to make a finding on that.
The fact that a setback was applied to this property after it was built serve as an unusual, you know, trying to put on common sense to, and also following regulations, I guess, is the
Right.
tightrope I'm trying to walk.
Yeah.
To me, it's
Well, it also
not
could
making
be.
it worse in this area because the other structures that are farther in. So for me, if it was wanting to go deeper into the setback with some other structure that may make it a little different feeling than something that's enclosed, and once it's done, you may not ever know that it hadn't been there for 20, 30 years like the rest of this stuff. But if you tell me, if I'm going against the, I'm open to see.
No, you're definitely not going against anything, and it's possible it could be a combination of factors. It could be, yes, the fact that the building was built and oriented on the property in this way prior to the existence of the setbacks, and perhaps they would have built the building in a different location with a different layout, so bathrooms not in that location, for example, had they known. Perhaps that could count as an unusual factor, an unusual characteristic of the property, and that perhaps combined with the location of the railway spur, which forecloses any expansion to the north. Those two factors together could perhaps rise to that level. I think that would be in the board's discretion.
Yeah, and I mean, what you have in item number 2 in particular is, you know, saying that it's within the front setback. I think Mr. Tully's correct. If you're going to have to find a kind of a secondary contributing factor there, just with the number of buildings to the north that are set back at a similar rate, you know, you would be looking to something else on site as contributing to, you know, that building having been built as far forward as it was.
I need to ask a question to Mr. Roundtree, just a question. What is the square footage of the building that's there?
Mr. Tipp, it's 100,000 square feet.
100,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're really essentially here arguing about is 54 square feet,
Correct.
extension out, And again, I'll go back and restate that there's all these other, it's not unique because so many buildings
Right.
are not in compliance. Sometimes I feel like, pardon this, sometimes we strain a gnat and swallow a camel. And I'm just trying to apply a little common sense here. I think yes, it does not, I think we can say it doesn't meet all 5 standards.
Correct.
I think we're up here sometimes to make decisions that if you strictly follow that, they don't need us because your staff is already making those decisions. And I think this is a time when common sense and discretion would come in to say, yeah, this time we're going to approve this, and yeah, if you bring another one up that meets a lot of these other things, we'll consider it in the same right. But I think 54, I look at 54 feet versus 100,000 square feet. You know, I don't really see how we're hurting anyone along Park Avenue if we were to approve it. And I'll be my last comment.
It seems that the piece that's unique, and maybe Mr. Donovan, you can pull back out on the overhead shot, but the side of the building is in the front, which that's not really like that on a lot of these other buildings. I mean, isn't that right? The front is sort of along the side there. You see where they go in here, in this picture? Because this is what we're talking about, right? So it's like the side is actually in the front of Park Avenue, which that's unique compared to those other buildings.
I guess our task is making sure we've met the standards and explained them, so if somebody else down the street and we don't feel it matches, we've got something to fall back on, I guess is our charge. Am I correct?
Yes. And to your point, standard 4, for example, is that the granting the variance would not be unduly detrimental to other properties. And so the sort of de minimis nature of this expansion relative to the building size and the property size and the surrounding properties, given how minor you may conclude that it is, perhaps that if there were other, you do have to make findings as to each of the standards. And each of the standards, each one, there has to be a finding in favor of either granting or well, if you grant it, there has to be a finding in favor of each of the of the standards. If any of the standards are not met, then you can't grant the variance. However, if the determination were close as to whether there are enough characteristics that are unique to the property, you think there are some unique characteristics which you need to make specific findings about, but you weren't sure if those are unique enough, but perhaps this one predominates, that given that the expansion is so minor that kind of sways you. I think that could be
Make this one unique enough that it's.
perhaps, but again, I do have to emphasize that there have not. I haven't heard any discussion or a finding from the board of what is unique about the location of this property relative to the properties around it. That is the need for this, and that is necessary in order to grant this.
The fact that previous conversation with regards to the easement and the spur itself wouldn't quantify that?
If the board believes that that's sufficient, then that would quantify it. But the board would need to make that determination.
I think we agree on that point.
I agree with that.
My issue here is I'm not smart enough to go through each one of these items and go back through some of the reasoning that we had. I don't know if somebody's taking minutes that we can figure out, or somebody else wants to tackle that. I think Tim tried. I'm not trying to make fun. I'm not trying to make fun of this. That's not my point. I'm just maybe we collectively go through this.
We don't want to ignore what the city's asking us
That's
to
correct.
clarify.
That's correct.
So I think that, and Mr. Donovan maybe check me on this, but it seems that if the board believes that the location of the railway spur foreclosing expansion to the north, coupled with the fact that an alternative location for this would require an easement over another property, the board believes that is unique enough. I think that would probably satisfy standards 1 and 2, Mr. Donovan.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Tully. I think the easement and rail spur justification, if that's the direction the board wants to take, would meet 1 and 2.
So then that leaves standard 3, which is that the variance is due to characteristics and hardship that's not created by the action of the applicant. I'll just reiterate staff's conclusion in this regard was that the staff believes that the need for this particular power equipment was due to the operations of the applicant. And if there were, for example, a different tenant doing a different type of business in this location, they wouldn't need that. Therefore, because it's due to the specific use by the tenant, it's in a sense created by the applicant. Did I summarize that correctly?
Essentially, the operator of the suite becomes the owner's agent. They are, in effect, they are using the building. You know, they are an agent of the owner from that standpoint. You know, and that's the reason staff came to the conclusion they did in number 3. So it's the owner's agent, which in this case is a tenant in the building.
I guess it's not unique to this property, but as soon as the building was built and then the setbacks were placed on it, anything they need another heating and air outside that was 2 feet off anything off the building would, so they were going to request, you know.
They can't hook up a chain to the building and pull it back outside of it. It's already there.
Anything that needed to happen outside.
So you're already hamstrung because our regulations came in after this major 100,000 improvement was there. So again, I'm not smart enough to be able to articulate, but from what I've heard and what I see, I think that is why we have a special exception that we can deal with. Even if someone else comes forward in the future, we can use the same rationale.
I bet Matthew is smart enough to.
No, I would not dare to make that claim. Good afternoon, Chairman Young and members of the board. I just wanted to provide some historical context. And I think it's good that we're having this discussion. I think it's necessary because variances aren't supposed to be easy, and the deliberation on variances is not supposed to be easy. The Tennessee Code Annotated gives us very stringent standards that we must review. And for those of you who have been on the board quite a number of years, I'm looking at you, Chairman Young, and you, Vice Chairman Halliburton. We used to see a lot more variances come before the Board of Zoning Appeals. We were much more liberal in the granting of them. And then about 10 years ago, the city made a conscious decision to make sure that we consistently applied state law to how we handled variances. And that's why you rarely see variances on the agenda of the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals agendas are now dominated by special use permits and very, very few variances, because in most cases there are very, very few cases that can meet the standards that are outlined in state law. We even went so far a few years ago, Mr. Ives rewrote Section 10 of our zoning ordinance to make sure that it was consistent with the Tennessee Code Annotated and make sure that those standards were nearly identical to what was in state law. So I just wanted to provide some historical context and say that all of this discussion is good. It's what should happen when we have a variance, because the state sets a very high bar for the granting of a variance. And Mr. Tully can correct me if I'm wrong, but and so this discussion needs to be had, and all 5 of these standards need to be fleshed out every time that we have a variance before us.
my simple mind, I mean, I'm not sure why we can't use the same reasoning for 1 and 2 for 3. I mean, we are saying that because of the way this piece of land is situated, that it's got a railroad spur, we're not able to, we will have to have an easement based upon the shape of the property and the fact that there's a railroad spur there. Why would that not be an unusual characteristic of the property itself that was not caused by our applicant?
Well, and not to speak for Mr. Halliburton, but I think we're also contemplating the fact that this is a public utility that a service that we're discussing. So I think if it was maybe a different use, they wanted to paint the building a weird color, or they want to reorient the loading docks or something like that, I think we would maybe take a different position. We likely would, where we'd be having a different discussion. But if it's water, sewer, power, these are, I don't think these are issues that were created necessarily by the owner or the agent.
And likewise, based on, you're talking about a building that's 45 years old, with the whatever electrical uses it have. Certainly not any type of electrical engineer or anything, but seeing how electrical use capacities is increasing demand anyways, you can see why the public utility in this case would say that you've got to upgrade this, and whether it was this tenant or the next tenant, they would have some similar issues that if you're going to meet today's demands with a 45-year-old building, there's going to be some exceptions.
Yeah, I guess, so what I'm hearing is the board's answer to number 3 is for the location of the rail spur and MTE's requirements.
It's not self-created.
Well, and also I think because the age of the electrical system required upgrading as well. And Mr. Donovan, do I recall correctly that there were some electrical issues that were happening previously on the property which precipitated this? Was there a fire or something, or am I misremembering that?
And Mr. McGuire, I think, relayed them to me, or it was Joe the Third, that they did have some electrical issues, I think, a couple of weeks prior to submittal of the variance.
So that does credit your conclusion that, given the age of the electrical system, it needed to be upgraded regardless, and so perhaps that the board could find that it was not due, that was due to the age of the electrical system as opposed to hardship being created by the applicant themselves, I think.
Yeah, and I think we're all, I don't think any of us want to put the board in a position that, binds us to some decision in the future. So, I think we're not creating precedent necessarily, at least in our minds, and I think that's what we would need your help with.
Yeah, the important thing is what we're doing right now is making determinations about this specific property, why, with these very specific facts, why the variance would be granted, so that other applicants in the future, if they don't meet these exact facts, it would be perhaps a different discussion.
It would be fairly unlikely that they would match everything that we've discussed. The size of the building, the context, the setbacks, the historical nature, current use, electrical needs. I think we've outlined a dozen reasons. So.
Which is why this has to be so fact-specific, exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we've satisfied that.
So those are the first 3 conditions, then the last 2, staff didn't disagree with the applicant, but the board does still need to make a determination. First, sorry,
I've got those pulled up where you should be able to see those last 2
there you go.
findings that staff.
From my motion, I would say that there was no detriment to the land and or surrounding it, and all the other, as we've already identified, so many of the other properties around there are very similar to the situation. And of course, where it's located, there's not going to be any increased in congestion or danger of fire or public health to the area, to addressing Ms. Smythe's her comments regarding speed, this has nothing to do with that. So I think from what we've talked about here, I do believe that we've met, this application meets all those standards
I
with
agree
the
with Mr.
exceptions we
Pitts.
have.
Acceptable motion? Do we arrive at?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes,
I
sir.
think we have enough.
I will ask that when you see the minutes next month, pay special attention to it.
Will do. And you have the second, Mr. Halliburton?
Yes. Well, no, actually.
He's second.
Yeah, Mr. Chips made the motion, Mr. Batchelor was
Okay.
second.
My apologies. Any further discussion? All right, if you'd call the roll for us.
Mr. Batchelor,
Aye.
Ms. Lavender,
Aye.
Mr. Tips,
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton.
Aye.
Chair Young.
Aye. All right, I think we tackled that one. Appreciate everybody's time and patience and guidance. Next, we'll move to special use permits. Our first application is Z25008 by John Hannington on behalf of Killian Dietz. They're requesting a special use permit in order to construct and establish an accessory apartment in a single-family residential RS-15 zone. This is for property located at 2505 Racket Club Drive. Mr. Shackelford Rowell, if you'll go over that for us. Good to meet you. I think it's the first time we've worked with you, if I remember right.
Thanks for letting me present this, Chair Young. Just give me a second to pull this up.
It's on page 24.
Got it. All right. This applicant, this application Z25008 is for 2505 Racket Club Drive. John Hannington, on behalf of Killian Dietz, is requesting a special use permit to put in an accessory dwelling apartment. It's currently zoned for RS-15, and the apartment would be going in the rear. Our ordinance calls for a maximum square footage of 700 square feet for an accessory apartment. The applicant is proposing 693 square feet. The maximum height of ADUs is 35 feet. This one is less than half of that at 14.5 feet. Within the RS-15 district, it has to adhere to 40 feet from the front setbacks, 12.5 on the side, and 30 feet on the rear. This ADU would be 94 feet from the property line, well over the front setback, 114 feet from the left side property line, 13 feet from the right side, and 30 feet from the rear. In addition, it is recommended that the applicant complete a standard restriction of use with the city attorney, basically saying that they will only use it for what we're trying to approve, this accessory apartment, and it will only be rented out to family members. The relevant sections for our zoning ordinance that adheres to this is Section 25, temporary accessory structure, subsection E, and Section 2, definitions. I've shared that with the applicant. The standards for general applicability with staff analysis. So the first, the proposed building will not have any substantial or undue adverse effect upon the adjacent properties. As mentioned, this is like a residential neighborhood, and this accessory apartment is within the use. It won't change anything from parking requirements or utility needs, and I don't see it having any adverse uses or any adverse effect on the neighborhood or the character of the neighborhood. The proposed building will be constructed, arranged, and operated as to be compatible with immediate vicinity and not to interfere with the development or use of adjacent properties in accordance with applicable district regulations. Staff believes that this standard has been met as proposed in the plans. The principal structure and accessory structure meet the bulk development standards and do not generate any traffic. The materials used for this property is hardy plank and are fireproof. So the proposed building will be served adequately by essential public utility services, such as highways, streets, parking spaces, drainage structures, and fire protection. Staff believes that the standard has been met. Proposed accessory apartment will be served adequately by essential public facilities that are currently existing. The proposed building or use will not result in destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined by the BZA as to be significant, such as natural, scenic, or historic importance. Staff is not aware of any such features on site that will be impacted by this use. And the last general standard of applicability, the proposed building or use complies with all standards imposed by the particular provision within a section of authorized use. It meets that, and there are some additional accessory apartments that I'll just read through briefly that we believe has been met or easily can be met. One of the accessory apartment, or only one accessory apartment, shall be on a single family lot. With the erection of this building, there will only be one, and there's not one existing at the moment. Except for bona fide and temporary absences, the owners of this resident or lot in which the accessory unit is created shall occupy at least one of the units on this premises, and the members of the family or their invited guests shall occupy the other dwelling. In no event shall either of the units be used as a rental for non-family members. So John Hannington, the person here on behalf of Killian, he's going to occupy the accessory structure, and then the Killian is going to occupy the primary structure. So we believe that has been met. The accessory apartment shall be designed so that the degree reasonably feasible, the appearance of the building remains one of a single family residence. In general, any new entrances shall be located in the side or the rear. Staff believes that this has been met. The accessory apartment is well in the rear. You can't see it from the front. Additionally, they will have access to the garage, this same garage, so or same driveway, excuse me. So you won't be able to tell from the front or from the side that there is another person living here. Standard number 4 for accessory apartments. If attached or located within the principal structure, the accessory apartment shall be designed and constructed to allow to be a part of the principal structure, such at the time of the accessory apartment discontinues or approval to special permit lapses. We've attached a site plan. This isn't an attached accessory apartment, it's detached, so the standard does not apply. The design and size of the accessory apartment shall conform to all applicable standards in health and building and other codes. As currently depicted, the accessory structure is 693 square feet if approved. The applicant is required to obtain all necessary building permits for the construction of this accessory apartment. The applicant has confirmed that the design and construction will be applicable to all standards. 35, it's within the 35 feet in height, and the max height of this, as mentioned earlier, is 14.5 feet. The accessory apartment shall not exceed 700 square feet. We believe that standard has been met at 693 square feet, and the BZA condition approval upon the special use permit lapsing such time as ownership of the property transfer. Staff recommends that rather than the above, the BZA, instead of conditional approval, the recording of a restriction of use of land prepared by the city attorney, which requires the accessory apartment only be occupied by a family member or an invited guest and cannot in any circumstances be used as a rental unit. The BZA may require additional standards be met in order to assure compatibility of the proposed building of adjacent properties to maintain the integrity of the single-family district. The applicant understands that the BZA may require additional standards to ensure compatibility. Then I just have my staff recommendations in addition to whatever you all may add. One, the owner and/or owners of the property of this accessory apartment shall occupy at least one of the units at all times. 2, there should be a restriction of use on land, as mentioned. 3, there should be an additional paved-way going from the garage to the accessory structure, just to make sure that whoever occupies that has a safe way of getting there for like when it rains and stuff. Separate utility meters and connections, including but not limited to electric, gas, water, and sewer, shall not be installed or requested by the ADU. A separate mailbox or receptacle shall not be installed for the apartment. And lastly, the applicant shall obtain all necessary permits with building and codes. And I have some images that I share with you. Oh, lastly, John Hannington is here to answer any other questions. And we did get one email with concerns of the property maintenance. As of now, is about the grass being cut. I shared that with Richard, and he should have given that to you all.
Yeah, no, that's the email that's on the dais in front of you.
So I have a question with respects to number 7. In the past, in the past we have said, hey, when this thing's sold, then the variance, the special use permit goes away. I understand that. I like this recording of the restriction. I think that's a very good idea. And so what we're saying there is this restriction is in perpetuity with respects to this lot. But the fact of the matter is the next owner would have this same right. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah, that, Mr. Halliburton, that is correct. And Mr. Blomley may have to provide some additional context on how long this particular item's been used. I know it's been the last 16 or so months that I've been with the city. That restriction of land use is required to be recorded with the Register of Deeds. That way, when you sell a property with an accessory apartment on it, you know, the next owner has the right to occupy that accessory apartment with a family member or invited guest per our ordinance and requirements of this body and the zoning ordinance for an accessory apartment.
Does it make me old that the fact that I'm always brought up here for historical context?
Wise.
Wise. Thank you, John. I like
I was about to
that.
say, I only have 16 months worth of time with the city, so.
Seasoned is more appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you. Seasoned and wise. I like that. No, so, Mr. Halliburton, I can't recollect in years where we have had a special use permit for an accessory apartment lapse. And I think probably the reason that is, and the reason why we started doing these restriction on the use of land, which I think we've probably been doing for about 10 or 15 years now, is because when you're talking about an accessory apartment, you're talking about physical structural improvements to the building. And you know, we just simply do not have the capacity, if we made these lapse when properties transfer, to then go and retroactively make that person physically change their structure in order to make it a single-family home. Right. And so really the main purpose of that restriction on the use of land is to put buyers on notice of how that can be used, so that when they buy property, there is something of record, and so that they should have no excuse for not knowing how they can't use their land compliant with the zoning regulations.
Might add likewise that there would be some situations where a mortgage company might not qualify it for financing if it's in the appearance of having 2 dwelling units. And I think by codifying that it's an ADU might make that fly by the mortgage company a whole lot better too.
An added bonus of having a mortgage expert on the,
Well,
on
I'm
the
not an
BZA.
expert, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn.
No, that makes, that makes perfect sense, Mr. Tibbs. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. I was just under the impression that they lost it when the house was sold. Not the restriction itself, but the fact that the variance would be, or excuse me, the special use permit would be in place.
Yeah.
And I'm fine.
I think we've done that more with like home-based businesses
Right.
than we have with accessory
Right.
apartments, because the lack of the structural component to most
Okay.
home-based businesses.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, any further questions for staff? Mr. Hannington, anything you'd like to add to the application? Please, sir.
Thank you. I'm John Hannington, and my wife Nancy is here. And the only thing I want to add is I thank you for your time, and I know these things are personal for us, and for you it's not quite so personal, and I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless you have any questions of me.
Any questions?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we want a comment on the email that we received or not.
I mean, that's up to the board how to address that. That was given to me, sent to me before the meeting today. I printed it out for your consideration, as I do with all public comment we receive prior to the meeting.
I think the only comment I'll make, I live in a much older neighborhood than even this. And as I drive by people who don't take care of their yards, I feel like it's a reflection on the neighbor and the neighborhood. So all I would ask is, if this is granted, there's no way we can tie one to the other. Let me just say that. But I would just make the comment that if somebody's taking the time to send this board an email, I think you need to take heed to that, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm not privy to the email.
Yeah.
But I'm also, if we're there, that condition wouldn't exist. My responsibility, so I'll help.
What do you mean
out.
by if you were there? I'm not following that comment.
He's not the owner.
If we're in the ADU, all of a sudden I'm the handyman that's retired and taking care of yard work
okay.
and
I'm
putting
sorry.
gardens in
He's
and
not
those
the
kind of
owner.
things.
Okay.
So-
He's
Okay,
the other
friend.
gentleman's the owner.
Okay.
I would address that email if I'm able. I am the owner.
Sure. If you come up to the podium, please, if you'd like to do that.
And Gillian Dietz, 2505 Racket Club Drive. As the owner of that property, the natural grasses occurring on that property were and historically are below the 12 inches except for the torrential downpours. And taking over a caregiving position not on my property for in-laws in particular has taken us greatly away, which is why we're attempting to bring them closer. So, for the disgruntled neighbor, as it may be, or the reflection on the neighborhood, these are naturally occurring species in the neighborhood. They are generally maintained within the 12 inches. The circumstances of which I'm getting these violations and these notifications and these emails, the timing is very peculiar. That trash is in the yard after a known windstorm has come through. At 11:50 at night is when the pictures are taken. So there are a couple things going on there, but I will say we do generally maintain that. And having my father-in-law and family even closer would allow us more time to be on property. So I thank the board for their consideration.
Thank you.
All right, this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward and provide us any comments you may have. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
I'll move to approve, subject to the conditions laid out by staff.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, if you'll call the roll for us.
Mr. Batchelor,
Aye.
Ms. Lavender?
Aye.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. All right, that application's been approved. Next item, staff reports and other business. Do we have any?
No, we have one. Don't we?
We have,
This one?
we have one
Oh,
additional
I'm sorry,
item.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. My apologies.
I mean, I would be okay with that since it's my item, but I don't think the applicant would
Don't mean to
appreciate
cut you
it.
short, my apologies. I'm sorry, now last application, application Z25010 by Mr. Jacob Highland, representing SBA, requesting to amend the conditions of approval for the existing special use permit for the existing 150-foot tall wireless telecommunications tower on property located at 2117 North Thompson Lane in a heavy industrial zone. The applicant is requesting to remove the previous condition of approval that all antenna mounted to this tower are required to be of stealth construction. Mr. Donovan.
All right, I will see how quick I can make this. All right, so the last application we have for you today is amending a special use permit to remove a condition of stealth construction. That condition of stealth construction was originally approved by this body in August of 1999. I had some discussions with Mr. Blomley and read some minutes prior to the meeting. Kind of what had transpired around that is that was a condition that staff at the time was requesting of all telecommunications towers. Since that time, really things have changed, and the concern with the aesthetic nature of the tower hasn't been as big of concern from staff, but maybe from this board if it chooses to do so. So that condition has went away. It's much more about being able to get service from those as, a public utility in some extent now, which is difficult, and the applicant may address this as more difficult to do with the stealth antenna. At the August 99 time, it was originally approved as 125 feet. This body has seen it additionally in February of 2022, where height variance was approved, increasing that height to 150 feet. What the applicant is proposing to do in this instance is to unstealth a portion of the antenna, and there's one of these that it's a little bit clearer what is occurring, but the first 99 foot of the antenna is remaining as it is today, or will look similar to it does today. You can see here on the drawing in front of you, and then the remaining 51 foot to get to that total of 150 foot would be changed out, and would be where the unstealthed antenna would be added. So what you're seeing there is a 49 foot tall unstealthed portion of the tower, as well as a 2 foot tall lightning rod that keeps you under that 150 total foot. So as I've stated several times, this is an existing tower. The existing tower currently has co-locations for 2 additional carriers. In addition to the primary, the remodeled, rehabbed tower will still have 3 locations on it, so it does meet our requirement to meet co-location on the site. They also are going to be doing some change out on the ground equipment, but none of that is going to functionally change in size or scope. It will be within the same footprint that there is currently. There's an 8 foot tall fence that currently encircles the cell tower and the associated equipment, as well as some screening that is provided from what would be Northwest Broad, and then there is a business that really blocks screening from Thompson Lane that would be to the east. As far as the properties around this, the property is irregularly shaded on the west side of Thompson Lane. Let me get back to the site. Well, I went too far. Way too far. area. So, as you can see on the map in front of you, the tower is actually located on the extreme northern portion of the site in question, tucked in behind the heavy machines business, which is zoned heavy industrial. The property that is to the west and north is city-owned property. That's the old General Electric site. And then further to the west, across Thompson Lane, is zoned commercial general. You see a variety of uses there, auto body, there's some auto sales. Murfreesboro's fire department headquarters is located there as well. And then to the south, you have a vacant parcel as well as a Circle K convenience store that is zoned heavy industrial. Staff has reviewed the application, and it is in relatively good order. Staff recommends approval with the removal of the stealth condition, as well as for new conditions that the applicant shall obtain all necessary permits and inspections prior to for the proposed tower and associated structures. Prior to applying for building permits, the applicant shall obtain approval of a site plan for the proposed development to the Murfreesboro Planning Department. The maximum height of the monopole and telecommunication tower antenna structures and all apertures or accessory equipment shall not exceed 150 feet, and discontinuance in the event of discontinuance of a telecommunication facility, the facility owner shall comply with requirements of the zoning ordinance, Chapter 31, for notification, declaration, and removal of the wireless communication facility. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have. And, the applicant, SBA Towers, has a couple of members of their team here as well that are available for questions.
So I guess for some historical context, the special use permit that was originally put in place that made this a stealth tower was solely because of staff recommendations and not because of any other reason?
Yes, it was, and I confirmed this with Mr. Blomley because I was under the impression it was in the zoning ordinance, but it was not. It was a condition that staff recommended at the time. Just kind of some additional context in the minutes that I read. It was actually proposed to have a flag on it, and there was debate amongst the BZA, and they ultimately asked the applicant not to fly a flag on it.
Noted.
Any further questions for staff?
When was this approved?
Originally in August of '99, the 25-foot height variance was approved in 2022.
And there are design standards that relate to all antenna or none or what? I see like different, like with the 5G towers around town, they're nicer in Medical Center Parkway, for example, than they are on Haynes. Are there design guidelines that relate to any antenna, any telecommunications?
So when you say 5G antennas, are you talking about small cell deployments? Yes. So there are different requirements in our zoning ordinance for small cells. I'm not sure what the intricacies on those. I haven't had the privilege to review small cells, and it may be an area, if you want some more details, I have to call on Mr. Blomley for his wisdom.
I just want to start out by saying that I was not here in 1999 when this was first. I was here in 01, not too long after that. But no, Mr. Donovan is right. He and I talked, and but even when I was advising the Board of Zoning Appeals a long time ago, we were putting an emphasis on the appearance of the towers, and I think that we kind of evolved in our thinking about that. When I say we, I mean staff. I can't speak for the board, but in that, a tower without any antenna on it, in our opinion, is not much aesthetically different from a tower with an array of antenna on it. And when in 1999, you think about how technology has changed, and since 1999, and what the needs are of telecommunications companies, and how much more data is being handled by the antenna. So I think that as Mr. Donovan mentioned, we err on the side, as staff, in our recommendation, we err on the side of kind of the more utilitarian side of things in what these antennas actually do rather than how they look, and putting more antenna on a tower also means that we slow the proliferation of the tower structures themselves, because the more antenna a tower can hold, the fewer towers that are needed to support those antenna. As far as the small cells within the city, really our department has very little to do with those, because 99% of the small cells that are erected in the city of Murfreesboro are in the public right-of-way. And we only have zoning jurisdiction over what's on private property. And so those towers that are being erected on public rights-of-way, which are, gosh, we get in dozens of those, and probably one may be on private property, but all of those are handled through our engineering department, and then also in working with the various utilities that they may be, replacing an existing light pole, or putting a small cell up. So really, from a zoning standpoint, there's very little that we do with small cells, except when one is located on private property.
Very helpful, as always.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Mr. Howell, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Jacob isn't here. I'm Jeff Taylor. I work for SBA, but if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so this is specifically for T-Mobile, not for the other providers on the tower?
It would benefit all of the different carriers. So, when the stealth tower was put up, the carriers can only put a specific amount of equipment inside there, just because of the size that you can deploy. But yeah, like the gentlemen have said, technology's come a long way, and the amount of equipment they need to put up there has grown, and to meet the carrier customers' needs, they just can't fit enough equipment up there to broadcast. So
That drawing he showed of the antenna showed AT&T and Verizon as well. Maybe proposed. I don't know if they're for sure, but it had.
Yeah, I guess the question was more so they're going to relocate the co-located equipment.
Correct. Yeah.
And so everything's going from stealth to traditional, or what would be the definition of that?
Yeah, there aren't plans to put more equipment up there for AT&T and Verizon yet. So this is specifically for T-Mobile at the moment, but I guess it would open it up for the other carriers to deploy more equipment as well.
Okay. And I guess as we see these around, obviously the stealth design was to answer an aesthetic question, and these towers are really, that's what's kind of before us today, is an aesthetic question. So is there sort of, and Mr. Donovan, maybe you could pull up like what a traditional tower looks like versus a stealth tower. And, I know I've seen towers that have been hidden with, trees and stuff like that. Obviously, we're not talking about that, but in your experience, these stealth towers have come about because of restrictions or zoning and whatnot. Is that true?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay, so is there a design that is somewhere in between this traditional tower that we're seeing on our screens? Although I guess you're not seeing it here, but what we're seeing on our screens is a traditional tower. I don't know if you can share that, versus a stealth design. Is there something that's sort of in between this stealth that exists and this traditional tower? Just to me, it's a little bit more unsightly.
There are monopines where there'll be tree limbs that kind of disguise the top of the tower.
Well, not so much in disguise, just that it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing.
It's really either this or the stealth pole.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know how to answer that.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you'd come forward and give us your name and address and provide us any comments you may have.
Hi, my name is Christina Lambert, and I live at 2160 North Thompson Lane. It's at the Rivermont Apartments. I'm in a townhome right there, and we are directly across the street from the tower. I guess the tower is a little bit catty corner to us, but when my children and I go outside in the playground area, which is where they, go with all the neighborhood children and play, the tower is in front of us, so we see it, when we're outside playing. And the way it looks right now, it's very nice. You don't think about it. It just looks like a pole. Also, I'd like to say I grew up here. I've lived in Murfreesboro pretty much my whole life. My parents live in Riverbend subdivision, which is just down the street. So we've passed this tower ever since it was first built. And I'd like to say we have excellent cell service, so it's working great, and we're very pleased with that. And I think that even though technically it's in an industrial area, it is at the very edge of that, and then right next to it is the Stones River National Battlefield, our apartments, and then neighborhoods, really nice neighborhoods. You've got the Stones River right there. And I feel, and my parents feel, that it would be unsightly if they took it out of this stealth mode and had all these antennas and you're driving past that on the way home. And especially for my children and all the children at Rivermont, because there are a lot of families with children, it's right there when you're outside playing. And we just don't want our home to feel like an industrial area. We want it to reflect the beauty of Murfreesboro, all the beautiful trees, the Stones River that's there, and the way it is right now is really nice. So I oppose this change. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Murphy Thomas. I live at 2111 Shannon Drive in the Riverbend subdivision. I'm presenting to you as president of our HOA, which represents approximately 157 different homes that are to the northern side of this property. This is the entranceway to our neighborhood, and there is that industrial aspect. In general, we're quite concerned about the appearance of this, the tone that it sets, the first impression that one gets. You don't want to think about going home into an industrial area. Anything we can do that would decrease that appearance, I think there's very strong opinions. And I have not done an entire voting for the neighborhood. All the officers of the HOA have asked me to come and present their conviction that this would not add to the aesthetic value. It's purely an aesthetic issue. Number two, there are those who raise questions about what is it going to do? Is it going to benefit our community? And I hadn't heard any testimony to that effect. They say they're going to add 2 new carriers. I'm not sure who the carriers are. There is poor reception in our neighborhood for AT&T. I'd like to know if that's going to be upgraded. What is it going to do other than to hang all this stuff on a pole, which we find to be ugly, frankly. And if it can be done, if we can make those improvements, technical improvements, in some other way, we're very much like to see that, but we'd like to have it done with taste and with some sensitivity to the aesthetics of what we're trying to create in that part of our town. Any question you have of me?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Deborah Mason with SBA. I kind of wanted to answer this gentleman's question. Being antennas, they're only limited to a certain size when they're inside of a stealth canister, and there is limits you to expansion. And so that's why AT&T is already on the tower.
If you,
But if
if you
they were-
give us your comments, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, AT&T is on the tower as well as Verizon. And if it was unstealthed, T-Mobile leading it, if the other carriers were to follow, they could get these larger antennas up there. And we have the coverage map that we submitted to show how much more it would expand the coverage in the area. Any other questions?
So it will expand, it's a definite increase
Correct.
in coverage and the service to every utility that's going to be on that pole.
Correct. Inside the canister, it's limited.
Okay. And with respect, I think, about the comment that the lady made about the battlefield, you've got
I have a
letter
SHPO,
in
yeah.
the file from the Tennessee Historical Commission that they, I guess that would apply to the battlefield even though it's a federal park, right, Mr. Donovan?
Yes, and that letter actually states that there are historic resources in the area, but the State Historic Preservation Office didn't feel that the change in the tower was affecting those resources.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else present wishing to speak for this? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open the floor for further discussion. I guess in the history of cell towers, as I remember them, there was, I guess, more limits that they wanted placed on boards like ours of where they could be. I guess we still have the option to screen them and that sort of thing, but does that ring any bells? What sort of parameters we have to versus them saying, okay, this is for the public good. We don't need to be, local boards don't need to be putting too onerous restrictions on them, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would defer to Mr. Tully in some respects, but there are, some federal standards that regard with that they do have with respect to cell towers, but this is like any other application you have. If there's a condition this body feels is appropriate to lessen impact on surrounding area, and in this case, the stealthing requirement already exists. So if the board didn't believe that unstealthing the tower preserves the area, you would have that latitude under our ordinance to remain at stealth.
The drawing that you showed didn't appear to have the pieces sticking out of it like the one you show that's behind Northfield.
That one doesn't have, that one shows the addition better. There is,
your picture seemed to show basic pole. Now, it maybe had some exposed pieces, but not, okay.
that one showed where the differences were better as far as things were being changed out, but this shows the what you can see on the screen now shows T-Mobile's antennas at the top. You can also see that they have the height of existing antennas, which those are remaining, but they're going to remain in the stealth portion of the tower.
So if others locate AT&T or Verizon, would they have this piece in blue sticking out there, or?
If they were to upgrade, I would suspect that that's what we would see. Okay. And you would turn into a situation similar to that.
Okay.
So with that being said, would they have to make a separate application?
They wouldn't need to make application. They wouldn't necessarily need to make application to this body, but they would have to get site plan approval for upgrades.
So I guess from a planning perspective, I know we have some planning professionals in the building here, but obviously there's the camouflage like the applicant was mentioning, which obviously we're not talking about here. There's this stealth that we have on the screen that exists now, and we've got these, the existing that we've seen in the neighborhood in Murfreesboro, like the example that you showed on Memorial and Northfield, and again, from a purely aesthetic standpoint, I find the the existing one, for example, with the 3 carriers and the cages and the arms and the antenna hanging off of it, aesthetically displeasing relative especially to what exists now. But the applicant said there is no design that exists that he's aware of that is somewhere between what we have currently in the city and what we see in the current stealth mode. Are there any planners here, or maybe the applicant knows of a different design? Because if we're going to place some restrictions here, it would be good to know, what our options are. It's either stealth or the old model, and it's 2025. I find it hard to believe that between a 20-year-old special use permit plus a 50-foot extension versus the existing, that there's not something that's a little bit better than hanging a bunch of antenna off of a pole in 2025?
Yeah, I am by no means a cell tower expert. Typically we do see monopoles, or I have seen another flagpole in the past. The option you probably see the most is stealthing it as a tree, but then you have this odd look of a 150-foot tall tree that towers over what is
and I don't
around
think
it.
we're talking about that. I just mean like the general design of and maybe the applicant could speak to this, but we end up with these arms that, so moving it from a stealth to the traditional model, and I think the example that we showed, and it may not be your tower, it may be another company's tower, but if we could pull that back up, I guess from the board's perspective, or at least my personal perspective, can you see how a citizen, a person, a member of this board would look at the existing stealth, and as the people who spoke today would say, it's very unobtrusive? You would agree with that, especially relative to what we see here? So you're saying that there is nothing for this board to consider between the existing stealth and what we're seeing, what we showed on the screen prior with the 3 carriers and a large cage with a various antenna hanging off of it?
Right, yeah, that's what it would be going to. Anything else, you would just be covering the antennas on the outside, but there's no way to really go in between a stealth or that option.
Mr. Dom, can you show me the before and after? And I assume would the after be potentially, or is that who's already planning to locate on this pole?
So when you say...
Like the coverage, how's it going to help the area, I guess?
Okay. So the applicant did provide this, and they may need to speak, they'll need to speak to this more. And so this is the coverage maps that they provided us. And that shows...
That's if you're a T-Mobile customer?
That is T-Mobile.
That's if you're a T-Mobile customer. So
Correct.
T-Mobile is only who's there now.
So they are not the only carrier on the antenna. Verizon and AT&T are co-located. The upgrade currently would only be for the new antenna array would be for T-Mobile.
Gotcha.
Correct.
So those are both current coverage.
What's the N2500 different bands, I guess?
Yes, that's correct, yep.
And then that's the coverage with the new array. And from my discussions with Jacob and the team during the pre-application meeting, and this gentleman can confirm, is I think the major improvement is indoor coverage.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure I was here in '99, but I can say that I was a big proponent of these stealth towers just because of the proliferation of cell towers, not just in Murfreesboro, but across the country. And my opinion just hasn't changed. I get the utilitarian need and the extra coverage that this would bring, but the aesthetic value to me is just as important, especially if I'm a neighbor around any of these cell towers. And just to be quite honest with you, I'm going to vote against this.
I agree with you, Mr. Halliburton, and I think the issue is that we would love to, as we normally do, work with applicants if provided some alternatives, but you've said there are none. So, I think you've kind of tied our hands here. I think everybody wants better cell coverage, but I don't think anybody wants and I think these stealth towers and the new designs that exist are to answer the questions of bodies like ours, to say there's got to be something in between so that we don't have the proliferation of the ones that we saw on the screen today. So I would be against it as well.
Yeah, and I'm gonna potentially propose a middle ground here to see if there's something that the applicant may be able to explore and research. The option, you also would have the option to defer this and maybe give them another month to see if there's something that they can do to address the concerns that Mr. Halliburton and Mr. Batchelor have brought up today.
Yeah, no, we welcome better design. It's, that's why I mentioned the small cell towers. There's obviously multiple designs for those relative to different parts of the even our city, which is frustrating to see, a well-camouflaged, well-designed, well-placed antenna. And then in other areas, you see that it's very poorly executed. And so, yeah, I think that would be wise to defer, to come back with a different design, and we welcome that, to try to find some sort of compromise. I know there's, to find that balance, we're not going to have necessarily perfect coverage and perfect aesthetics, but hopefully we can come to a better design.
Okay, yeah, I think, the only other way would be to go to the full array like is proposed, but then camouflage that. But that would be like with the tree looking design. But yeah, we can certainly go back and see if we can come up with another option.
I have a different opinion than my fellow board members on this, because I've worked on a lot of these in different cities, in the city of Chattanooga, city of Franklin, and especially with municipalities and local governments, trying to put special laws into place and regulations with these small cells. We saw what happened with that. The state of Tennessee basically took it over and said, we got this now. And if you look in our right-of-ways, we have so many inconsistent structures in the right-of-ways with different towers. And so to put, extra regulation when we're trying to just increase the technology and we're trying to increase the coverage for everyone, I think at the end of the day, that ship has sailed as far as the aesthetics in the right-of-way. So I just wanted to add that opinion about this particular application.
I would concur with my colleague over here as well. In this in particular, and recollection of other applications we've had, we were more concerned about the height and the fall area around it in a lot of the applications like this, and they were in other areas. And this one looks like, okay, the predominant area around it is industrial and the park, grounds, which they saw no historic, problems with the, damaging the historic area there. I do appreciate the folks of Riverbend and Rivermont, but as I look at the layout and everything, their impact is really minimized, other than the fact that they travel past it every day. And as Ms. Foy said, there's a lot of those things already there. So.
Yeah, and I can respect that. It's the, and I think that, if we can challenge, these providers to provide a better design, especially when we're looking out 10 years, we look at the improvements that are going to be made to that area, the, Thompson Lane expansion, the new park there. I think that, we're going to be looking back 10 years and saying, that's how we used to do it. And so I think, challenging the applicant and applicants like them to come up with better designs, I think would serve the city well.
However, as opposed to my position on the previous application, on this one, I do agree with the staff as far as their recommendations to approve it. But I'll go along with the will of the body.
Is there something you wanted to add, Matthew?
Yeah, I do recollect in years past that there was, and technology may have passed me by, but I seem to recollect that there was a closer mounted array that we had looked at in years past that wasn't the full array going around, but it wasn't tucked inside the pole either, like the ones in the current tower, but that were closer into the tower. And so I think that would be worth investigating if the board wished to defer action.
That would be my preference, just to see if we can come up with something better.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not going to be perfect, obviously, but
you can make that motion if you want.
I'd make that motion to defer.
I'll second his motion.
Then the applicant has agreed to the deferral. I guess we need to make sure he's okay with that action versus us putting you off. But
Yes, sir.
okay. All right, I have a motion and a second to defer pending other design possibilities that may take into account the board's wishes of design aesthetics. Any further discussion on that? All right, if you call the roll for us.
Mr. Batchelor?
Aye.
Ms. Lavender?
Aye.
Mr. Tips?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
No.
Chair Young?
Aye. All right, so we agreed to defer.
That being said, there is not a time certain when that would be brought back up, right? So that allows the applicant to come back when whatever time that they've had opportunity to come up with a resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically those deferrals would be reviewed as 1 month, and
Okay.
We'll start working with the applicant immediately, expecting to have it back next month.
That being said, if the applicant does need more time, they certainly at the next meeting could request an additional deferral if they wished.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Donovan?
I do not have anything else for you, Chair Young.
Okay. Appreciate everyone's time. We'll adjourn.